I am going to say something that may be controversial, and it should not be, but I'm going to say it anyway. Jesus was a resistor. We don't usually describe Jesus' ministry in this way, but Jesus resisted the religious, social, and political status quo that demeaned and degraded the most vulnerable. He did not acquiesce to the injustice and the oppression around him. On the contrary, Jesus was clear that my ministry is about preaching good news to the poor, the sick, and the oppressed. Jesus was bold because Jesus talked about forgiving debts. So Jesus was a resistor. And there are many people who do not like to think of Jesus as a resistor. It seems too political. I have been told on more than one occasion, I don't like the way you preach. You're too political. But Jesus was a resistor. And I know it because we can trace Jesus' approach to the empire to his founding narrative. Jesus was a rabbi in the tradition of the rabbis of the Jewish tradition. So he can trace his approach to the empire to Israel's founding narrative, in which the enslaved Hebrews challenged the very power and prerogatives of empire. Again, we do not like to sometimes speak of empire in this way, especially in church, but I want to let you know that powerful people and empires will go to great lengths to protect their power. Survey the history of powerful empires from ancient times to current times, and you will find example after example of some leader or some nation or some tribe or some empire seeking to secure place and privilege by oppressing the other. Time and again, we have seen how leaders use their lack of knowledge about the other to stoke fear of those who are different, or to oppress and divide or conquer vulnerable people. And so strong is this tendency and temptation to subjugate others that even God's own chosen people could not escape humanity's sin of hate, slavery, murder, and yes, genocide. Israel's experience of bondage and murder happens because there arose a king who did not know Joseph, Abraham's great-grandson and the advisor to the Pharaohs. As God promised Abraham and as God revealed through Joseph, the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful, and they multiplied greatly. You see, the blessings and abundance of God is revealed through the growth of Israel, from a patriarch Abraham to a family, to a people, to a nation. But the leader of Egypt did not know this people and would seek to overturn God's promise. This unnamed Pharaoh seeks to reverse God's plans for God's people. So in his lack of knowledge of the people of Israel, in his refusal to know and to understand the people in his midst, the Pharaoh feared them. Oh, you know what it sounds like. You can hear his paranoia. You can hear his fear. There are too many of them. What are we going to do with those people? They're not like us. We have to control them. They're getting out of control. They're growing by leaps and bounds. The fear is just leaping off the page. And in the middle of that fear, what does the king do? He develops national policy to deal shrewdly with them. And the national policy is now executed. Oppress them with forced labor. That's a fancy way of saying slavery. Enslave them. Ruthlessly impose hard tasks on them. Make their lives bitter with hard service. You know, it may be difficult to fathom it. And we may not want to admit it. We may not even see it, but slavery and oppression are often national policy. They don't just spring up out of nowhere. It's about national, it's about controlling, it's about doing something to those people. But the fear and paranoia can make leaders and empires go even further. The king of Egypt was so afraid of the Israelites that he resorted to genocide. He summoned and commanded Shiphrah and Puah, the leading midwives among the Hebrews, to kill every male baby born to Hebrew women. But I love the way the writer of Exodus says it. Shiphrah and Puah feared God. Now, what the writer means there is Shiphrah and Puah trusted God. Let's extend a little bit more. Shiphrah and Puah understood something. This doesn't sound like something God would allow. I don't think you heard me. Let me say it again. The king told them to come in and said to Shiphrah and Puah, kill the babies when they're born. And the writers of Exodus said Shiphrah and Puah feared God. They trusted God. They said, no, this is not something that God would allow. God cannot be present in the wounding of the human spirit. God cannot countenance the blotting out of God's good creation. Shiphrah and Puah remembered who and whose they were. They remembered the promise and blessings that God gave them, that God gave to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, and to them. They remembered in their fruitfulness that they were a people now, a sign of God's presence in their midst. They refused to participate in a national policy of genocide of God's people. Notice I said they refused. They didn't negotiate. They just refused. They didn't say, do you want to reconsider? They said, no, we will not participate. So they let the babies live. Shiphrah and Puah used what little power they had to resist the powers that be, and they let the babies live. If you don't hear anything else I say today, that is what resistance looks like. Oh, but Pharaoh called them back in and said, you let the babies live. You let the, why did you disobey? Why did you go against national policy? This is policy. Get on board.